I've got slides, but I thought I'd just start by sharing. So I've had my company, the Mood Factory, for almost 18 years. And I started my nonprofit about the same time. So it was kind of a social impact venture, but back in those days, we didn't call it social impact. I knew that when I launched my company, I wanted to support a nonprofit organization focused on mental health. I had my own struggles in my teens with addiction and self-harm, and I had my own suicide attempt in my 20s. And when I was 18, I lost my father to suicide. And it was really, really devastating. And I just found at the time there weren't a lot of resources and people weren't talking about it. And the more research I did, less than 25% of people with depression around the world were actually receiving treatment. And yet it's up to 80% or more treatable. And so I started doing research on why this is the case. And I looked at a lot of nonprofits in this space, and I found the branding for mental health and depression to be very depressing. So I would look at it and the images would be sad, that people would be alone in the corner, isolated. And I thought, anxiety and depression can affect anyone. And that's not necessarily what someone looks like when they're in a major depressive episode or dealing with anxiety or panic disorders or PTSD. So I set out about starting a company. The company was about engaging the senses. The Mood Factory had a product line called Mood Lights. And so I decided at that same time to start my own nonprofit for rebranding depression and mental health. So that's really where I started. And hope has played an integral key part on my whole entrepreneurial journey. I got some success with the product line. So I got celebrities loving it, and I got a ton of press. I got it in some retailers, and then I ended up getting what's kind of an entrepreneur's dream, but I got to license my brand to a major manufacturer. And I redid Lowe's home improvements colored lighting set. We had 28 SKUs that were beautiful, and we had cause marketing. So a quarter for each light bulb sold went to the work on rebranding mental health. And so it was a really exciting time and amazing. And because of my business background, I got exposure. We sit at the United Nations. I attended the World Health Organization has this mental health forum every year in Geneva, Switzerland. I got invited to global advisory boards. So I really got engaged with some kind of pioneers in the science of mental health and the work that people were doing. So I spent the first probably 8 years listening really closely to what everyone was doing in the space. And then I would say it was about 10 years ago, that we got some funding. So we got, had this success with the brand. And I said, I want to look at a programmatic solution for suicide prevention. And, we deal with suicide prevention. We talk about hotlines, it's really important that if someone's in crisis, they have support, they have somewhere to go, they know who to call. So we know that's a real effective means of reducing suicides. And then we also do what's called restricting access to means. So making sure that people don't have access to things that can harm them. And we know that's effective. But I said, what about really truly preventing suicide from a much sooner approach? And so we did a lot of literature review, and hopelessness was the single consistent predictor of suicide across the literature. It's the primary symptom of depression and anxiety. And we talked a little bit about hopelessness, Dr. Sabah did. But I didn't know what hopelessness was. And I thought, why don't I know what hopelessness is and how to proactively manage it? And so there were researchers in the science of hope. And so I started looking into how they measure hope, what the outcomes are as it relates to hope, and why hope is important in life. And then I set out to create, because they weren't teaching you how to hope. And I thought, this is key. Like, people have to know, we talk about hope, but how do you actually hope when you're in hopelessness? How do you get to hope? And so I set out about proving out a theory that you can teach hope, that it can be accessed anywhere around the world and used in different cultures. And so that was about 10 years ago. we started with 10 lessons. We moved to 12 lessons, did research in Northern Ireland and Suriname and Malaysia and focus groups and Chicago. And we just recently went on to 16 lessons, but that's kind of how I've gotten to Hope. It's been a real entrepreneurial journey, and the Hope overall has been really key to just how I'm getting to where I'm getting. So my company, the Mood Factory, has been kind of put to the side a little bit. I'm still like doing some work with it. I run the nonprofit and the work we do with young kids. And then I also started a company where I'm working on college coursework for Hope as well. So that's kind of a background of how I got to where I got today and how I got to actually finding hope and the science of hope. So not just talking about hope. So I'm going to share my screen now and talk to you about specifically about the work we're doing in Hope, which is super exciting. And we have research that we just got from our college program that I'll share in a bit, but I'm just really excited. And again, yesterday, the idea is to create a global movement for hope so that cities around the world have free access to resources that helps to activate hope in their community. So I think the most important thing, if you can take away from this, is that hope is teachable, and it doesn't matter where you are in life or what you're dealing with. Hopelessness is learned, and we'll talk about that a little bit, and it's a consequence of oppression and discrimination. And yet hope is teachable. So you can become better at hope. You know, our mayor yesterday said she loves when I talk about it as a muscle. So you go to the gym to work your muscles. Well, you have a hope muscle, and you can strengthen your hope muscle, and it takes practice. And, you know, we fall down, but that's really what it's all about. So it's a universal concept. We've studied it around the world, and people understand it around the world. And it's a really positive, to me, take on mental health. You know, everyone's impacted by hopelessness. We all have to kind of know what hopelessness is and how to really manage hopelessness and get to hope. So it's mental health on so many levels, and it's so much more. You know, the superintendent had mentioned that 50% of young kids feel hopeless on a regular basis. I mean, that should be really shocking to us, and drive us to action. Because again, this is manageable if we can teach and elevate hope. But it's a consequence of depression or of discrimination and oppression. It's predictive of loneliness and suicidality. It's the primary symptom of depression. They've done studies where they show it's predictive of weapon carrying on school property, and addiction and violence and self-harm. So there are all of these consequences of hopelessness and of not addressing hopelessness. So if we see hopelessness on the increase, we know that things like addiction, violence, self-harm, all of those are going to increase as well. And risky behaviors in youth. It's often a consequence of multiple adverse childhood experiences, which they call ACEs. So if you've had trauma in your childhood, you're more likely to be hopeless. And it's a consequence of bullying, and again, race-related discrimination. So there are a lot of negative consequences of not addressing hopelessness. But yet again, the good thing is you can teach hope. So you can learn how to hope so that kind of whatever you want in life, you know how to get from hopelessness to hope. And it's fascinating, when I got into the field, they've done a lot of work on hope overall, and they've looked at outcomes. So there are a couple of different scales that people use for hope, but it relates to, you know, greater emotional and psychological well-being. The more hopeful you are, the less likely you are to have anxiety and depression. So it's what's called a transdiagnostic for anxiety. It accounts for 14% of productivity in the workplace. So I don't see if you can, more so than intelligence, optimism, and self-efficacy. You have better physical health, you have better problem-solving skills. And I think when we get into the how to hope, you'll kind of understand this. It's very cool because your hope score is actually predictive of your athletic performance, more so than even your abilities. So even if your abilities aren't the best, if you learn how to hope really well, you can do better. You can Yeah, workplace safety. So all kinds of things that are impacted when you improve hope. So I want to talk about what hopelessness is, and it's important that we all go away just knowing how to identify hopelessness and what kind of the two key ingredients are. So when we look at hopelessness, we look at both motivational helplessness, so lack of action, you can't do anything and powerless, and you can see why if you've been discriminated against or bullied or oppressed, you can often feel powerless. And it's also emotional, so it's emotional despair, so you feel horrible. So when we teach hope, we talk about how do you manage emotional despair and how do you manage your motivational or improve your motivational helplessness. So there are a lot of experts in the science of hope. I have studied them all and came up with kind of my own definition. I'm curious, I would love to just have some people tell me, what is hope to you? Like, how would you define and describe hope? I'm going to stop my share. I just would like to open up. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts? Or you can put them in the chat box. How would you define hope? Like if someone said, what is hope? What would you say? Optimism. Awesome. What else? Believing things can be better. Absolutely. A positive feeling that you are able to do something. Feel good about things. Love that.
I would say hope is a healthy coping skill for life stressors and recognizing that you have the agency to move forward. So it's not just a wish, but it's also recognizing like, what can you do to get through the adversity of life?
Yes, love that. Yes, agency is so key in hope. Never giving up, thinking positive outcomes, confidence that one can be effective. Yeah, these are all amazing. Hope for positive change. Hope for me comes from my faith. Yes, faith can be a very important part of hope. And we know that there's some tie in research that those that have faith can be higher in hope. Because it's a skill that we can use as part of kind of our overall framework for how we talk about hope. So yeah, those are all wonderful. And it's, great that you're thinking about it and you've thought about it. When we talk about hope, I looked at it from the definition of hopelessness. And so when you look at it, it's both emotional, so that despair. So you want to get to positive feelings. So hope is really a vision about something in your future. And it can be big or little. It can be getting out of bed or brushing your teeth, or, you can hope to, it doesn't have to be some grand thing, but it's both that vision for something, and then it's feeling good. And then again, it's that self-efficacy. So the helplessness component, we talk about inspired action when we talk about hope. So, oops, sorry. So I do have a podcast called The Hope Matrix, and then I created an actual hope matrix to help kind of visualize when we think about hope. So on the one end, I put the helplessness. So, and this is down here in the hopelessness where it's circled, that's where we're high in hopelessness. So we're helpless, we feel helpless, we can't do anything, and we feel in despair. And so again, when we teach how to hope, we really teach about how you manage despair. Because oftentimes what happens is we run from despair because we don't want to feel the sadness or the anger or the fear. So we run to things like addiction or self-harm or violence, because that feels better kind of than that despair. But we also talk about helplessness. And the helplessness is a lot of goal setting. How do we set goals? How do we create a vision for our future? What are SMART goals? So we teach different methods for getting to hope. And we talk about the 5 keys to shine for hope, which I'll go through, which is kind of the framework we've created to share how we talk about and teach hope. And being in nature is helpful. It's super helpful. There's a lot of research around nature and hope as well, actually. So we have what's called, there's an adult Snyder Hope Scale, and there's a children's hope scale. I didn't send that to you, but I can put that in the chat, or it's on our website. You can measure your hope. And what we tell people is it doesn't matter. It's like your steps. It doesn't matter what your score is, but you just want to start keeping track of it, and you want to work to improve your score, because there's always a way to improve your hope. So, but there are a variety of scales that they use in science to study hope, and then outcomes as it relates to hope. So what are the 5 keys to shine for hope? So when we talk about this, we talk about stress skills. So how to identify and manage your stress response. When we teach young kids, we teach about the downstairs brain that we call, and then the upstairs brain. And the downstairs brain is our reptilian brain, where we're in fight, flight, or freeze. And we can't think clearly. We can't be creative and collaborative and problem solve, which is where upstairs brain is and where we access those functions. So the first thing we teach is how to really manage the stress response and those things that cause despair in our lives. The second thing is happiness habits. So how do we produce those positive chemicals in our system that keep us in that joyful state, especially during times of distress? Because oftentimes when we're in a high stress time, we leave those things. We don't do the things that are really healthy and good for us that keep us healthy. And that's when we need to do them the most. We talk about inspired action, so kind of how to set goals and achieve things. And then we talk about nourishing networks, how to create strong networks, and then eliminating challenges to hope that we'll get into a little bit. But these are our brain's things that it does that stops us from getting to hope. So we do things like ruminate on past events, or we worry about the future, or we try to control things outside of our controls. So when we created a framework for hope, this is really how we've kind of started structuring and how we teach hope. So the first thing we're going to talk about is stress skills. Now this is a good time to pull out your trigger worksheet. If you all have one, I think they're going to put it in the chat as well. And I'll talk about stress skills for a second, and then we'll go through specifically the trigger worksheet. So stress skills are really to help both short-term stress response and then longer-term managing stress. So staying in a calmer place. And these are some skills that have been shown. 90-second rule, which I think is the most important thing to learn. So as it relates to stress and hope. So when we are triggered by something in our environment, and hence the trigger worksheet, we feel sad, we are triggered emotionally and generally in a negative way. So sadness or frustration or anger or fear. And we feel that in our body somewhere, and different feelings elicit different responses. Our body goes through a physiological process. Dr. Bolt Taylor wrote a book about it, My Stroke of Insight. And she talks about this 90-second flooding of chemicals going through our body that stop us from being able to access our upstairs brain, which is where our, critical thinking and problem solving and, really being in the present moment comes from, and making good decisions. So when we make decisions during this 90-second physiological response to stress, we make really poor decisions. And so to me, this is so important, learning how to understand what triggers you and then how to get ahead of it. So how you can start kind of proactively managing what is triggering you so that your triggers don't control you. You start being able to navigate life in that way. So these are some different things that have been, meditation. So the 90-second rule is to just stop, don't react for 90 seconds. Just let your body relax. Breathing is really good. I'll say that recent, it's a tough subject to bring up, but this Oscars event that happened with Will Smith that I'm sure many of you heard about. This is a perfect example of what happens when we're triggered and we don't let those chemicals flood through our body. We make horrible decisions. We can't, be in our mind where we're making good decisions. And so really taking time to let that go through your body, and then also noticing when other people have been triggered and giving them space to take the 90 seconds is so important. So I'm going to have you get into groups. Let me just stop the share. And we're going to take a look at the trigger worksheets. And I'm not sure how we do, if we can do breakout rooms in on here. We can also just chat about it in the chat box if you all want. But the idea here is to talk amongst yourselves. And maybe we can just talk on Zoom if you want, about your triggers. And so discuss with, you can get, again, 2 or 3 people, discuss in your group. We're going to take about 5 minutes. Talk about what's triggering us these days. Like, is it tests? Is it, work? Are there people? Is it the news? And what is, and then talk about limiting beliefs. And limiting beliefs are important for hope overall. There's some research on the placebo effect. If you take a pill and you believe it's going to have a positive impact on you, it's more likely to have that positive impact on you due to only your belief. And the same thing is true with the nocebo effect. So if you take a pill and you think you're going to have a side effect from it, even if you just take a sugar pill, you're more likely to report those side effects, even if you've not taken a pill. So we talk about limiting beliefs. What are the things you tell yourself that limit you from achieving whatever it is you want? We talk about the emotion that's associated with that. So fear or shame or sadness or whatnot. Then we want to just talk about, where is it in our body? Like, where do we really feel that? So that we can start to feel physical sensations, because sometimes we don't even realize when we're triggered, but we might get a physical sensation, and that'll kind of be that indicator. We want to talk about the behavioral response. So what is your usual thing? Do you react in that moment? Do you run away? Do you resolve it? Do you take your 90-second pause? And then we want to just talk about a stress skill that we might be able to use to help kind of manage that specific trigger. And then how you resolve the trigger event. So how you kind of work then to help it so that you're not so triggered in the future. So that's the trigger worksheet. Does anyone have questions about it?
Not seeing any over here.
Well,
Cruz.
good. All right. So I can't really see so if you can all break up into groups, if you're in person, 2 or 3, and just, you can maybe take a minute to think about the sheet itself. If you want to just write some notes down, if you can think of any. And I think the idea of doing this in groups, and we've had really incredible success in our research and work on this, is you kind of share with each other, and you learn your triggers may be different, but you might have skills that you can learn from other people and how they're managing some of these things. And we are all triggered, it's all of us. And so learning how to kind of get support from others and different ways to kind of manage those triggers are super important. So go ahead, and we'll take about a minute. You can work on your own and then share among the group for about 4 minutes, and then we'll get back together and we'll all talk about it.
I wrote down a couple things for myself. Some triggering behaviors are when I see people being disrespectful, when they act entitled, if they're mean or bullying, whether it's to me or to other people, shaming somebody, all that stuff. I personally, I have a hard time thinking about the 90 seconds. But I like I got something I know I need to work on.
Yeah, the 90 seconds, especially when you're triggered, is like a year to me. It feels like a long time. So, and when someone's in danger and harm, you don't want to, you can intervene, and it's just learning how to, when we're in traffic and we get cut off, and then we cut, it's those kinds of, or you get an email and you send an email right back because you're triggered by something, or those are kinds of and learning really what that is all about in us is just so important. So anyone else?
Hi, I'm Kim. Can you hear me okay? I don't have a
Yes.
camera, but I just put, for me, a trigger is a student not doing as well as they should. And then I say to myself, I'm not a good teacher. I'm not good enough. And then I feel it in my stomach, or I think about when I get home, what I could have done better. And yeah, and I just keep going in my mind. So it fosters a lot. So with how I feel in terms of not being good enough, or, you know, going back and saying I should have done this when it's already done.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about, what is your kind of behavioral response?
Lately, to just say I'm giving up on teaching, right? Yeah,
Oh,
no, not true.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Yeah.
I have those
I know.
moments of just wanting to give up. But in the bigger picture, I kind of reflect and try to figure out, what if it should happen again, what could I do better?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And do you challenge those limiting beliefs around I can't teach or I'm not a good teacher?
Well, yes, I do, because here I am taking this class and trying to find the hope and trying to find different ways and strategies to help my students and myself in how to react to their behaviors.
Yep. No, absolutely. And I mean, part of limiting beliefs are really figuring out what are some limiting beliefs we have, and finding, you know, in courses that we do this in more detail, but finding affirming beliefs that actually are very, that show that that's just a limiting belief and it's not true. You know, it's, you're an amazing teacher. And so working on, reaffirming those and remembering the examples, and we'll talk about this in our how we nourish our networks, but you know, we have to say 5 positive things to ourselves for every negative thing we say. So it's yeah. What about stress skill you can use when you're triggered? Is there something you can do that can support you in that kind of triggering moment?
Well, I actually do a mindfulness in my class. So we do breathing, you know, and I model it for them, even though a lot of them think it's kind of weird, and they feel uncomfortable because they're in a group. So I tell them, you know, I do it when I'm sleeping or in the car. It doesn't have to be just, you know, when you're in the classroom. If you're finding a time that you feel distressed or upset or angry, you know, that 90-second rule is really good, because that takes you're taking the time to breathe and to reassess. You know, I've sent out those horrible emails after, and the 90-second would have been really good for me.
I know. Yeah, I mean, that's really the purpose of this worksheet, is to just start thinking about when we're triggered, and then what we tell ourselves in our brain, and then what we tell ourselves further activates that trigger. So like, I'm a bad teacher, and then we do all these things that further that kind of cycle of despair, which is, you know, and so learning how, oh, I feel that, and then intercept it with a positive reaffirming belief. I'm a great teacher. I do so many things right. I help so many students, you know, so finding examples or can help kind of transform that. But first we have to get aware of what we're being triggered about and what we're saying to ourselves and how to identify it and all of that. And that takes a lot of work. And again, I mean, I was never taught how to do that or why to do that, but
Yeah, I really appreciate you offering this webinar, because I feel like I do a lot of, I go swimming. I'm a lap swimmer. So for me, that's my kind of like, I'm in the water and I just kind of escape from everything. But then I get back on surface and I'm having to deal with everything still, right? So
yeah.
having the hope and the strategies, I think are really going to be beneficial for me and my students.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. I just want to read, Dave said, when I'm triggered, I move my hand in a flowing motion and imagine the anxious feelings I'm just having just flowing through me and not harming me. That's awesome. That's a really great skill. It's a good way to like visualize it and create movement and move the energy. Is there anyone else that wants to share before we join the group again?
I just try to breathe in the moment. And because I know in the past I've made mistakes where I've lost my cool with kids. And then I always make a point of going back after things have settled down and apologizing for how I reacted and explain like, hey, sorry, that's not the way I wanted it to go. So to catch myself and just breathe, not 90 seconds, but a couple deep breaths, and it definitely helps the situation.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's great that you take responsibility for it too. And, apologize and own we're all human and we're all going through this. And during times of great stress, we're so easily triggered, but modeling to kids that this is okay, it happens. And this is the kind of physiological aspect of it. And this is how we kind of work to get back to hope and yeah. So it's amazing. Anyone else?
We have some folks at the Cruzio site that would like to share. So
Amazing. Yeah, perfect.
which person wants to take the honors? Thank you.
While we were talking to each other, we kind of just heard stories that we all related to in different ways. So that was kind of nice to see that everybody has the same problems, I guess. I guess losing control or lack of control sometimes, and then also bigger problems than you can really handle 100% and whatever 100% is. And so sometimes we try to find mechanisms to help us say, what you did was the best you can do, and that's what you can do. And that's probably why you're there. For some of us, we have some faith telling us that it's supposed to be this way, and so let the story unfold, and we'll get past this. Yeah.
Awesome. Love that. Control is a big thing. People like to be in control. So it's a big trigger when people feel their control is taken from them or their power is taken. It's very triggering and stress goes up. And I think that's why we saw a lot of the violence increasing during the pandemic. A lot of people felt a great loss of control. Other thoughts? Well, I just want to note, we talked about it. And anyone on Zoom want to share with everyone what we talked about or what you talked about? We had a very good discussion. So, I think to me, we all have triggers and we're all going through experiences when we've done workshops with high school students, and no matter how different they seem, getting in groups, we're all getting triggered by different things and we react in different ways. But the idea is taking ownership of it. And someone mentioned on our Zoom that, he apologizes. Like if he overreacts, he then identifies it with the student, apologizes, takes ownership of it. And I think that's the most important thing, that we're all kind of in this together. But that's one kind of thing we talk about with hope, with triggers. I'll go on to talk about, let's see. We have happiness habits as our second key to hope. So when we talk about hope, we talk about managing the downstairs brain through that trigger worksheet and managing what makes us sad or angry or frustrated, and really identifying those feelings and then moving them into action. We also talk about happiness habits. So what are those things that release those positive neurochemicals in our bodies? Being kind to others, we know, exercise, even smiling releases endorphins, a feel-good kind of chemical, invigorating music. So the idea is to identify what these are for you. Everyone's different. And if you have any challenge, think about what you'd love to do as a kid. And incorporate more of that into your life, especially during times of great stress. So when we're in our upstairs brain, and again, we have positive feelings. When we think about hope, it's a vision for a future fueled with positive feelings, and then actions. So when we talk about actions, we do a lot of goal setting work. We talk about SMART goals as kind of a framework So specific goals, measurable, attainable, relevant to us, important to us, and time bound. So we have some kind of measure. The goal is to not get it too attached to the outcomes of the goals or the goals, because what we know about hope, it's your ability to overcome obstacles, and then sometimes you need to re-goal. So that's really key to hope. But this deals with that helplessness part of hopelessness that we talked about. So we need to find pathways to our goals. We need to have the power, so the agency. We need to pivot. We talk about stepping. So helplessness can often come because we have a goal and we get frozen because there's too much to do. So learning how to chunk it down into 10 specific steps and then just do that one thing. They talk about making your bed in the morning, how that can have a significant impact on your day, because you start with that one thing that works and then you go to the next thing and then the next thing. We talk about nourishing networks, and this is where we'll do the other worksheet. Nourishing networks are really about bi-directional networks. So we want to have people that we're surrounded with that support us into everything we hope for, and then we want to support other people. And so how do you really build that network? We know that all kids need to identify at least one person they can go to in times of crisis or in times of need. They need to be able to identify that at least one person. And when we go through when we teach Hopeful Minds to young kids, we make sure they all have at least identified one person. So this Hope Network is really about thinking about overall who is in your network and being intentional about how are they involved in your network, and what is kind of their role, and are you supporting them, and are they supporting you, and are they helping you in terms of what you hope for in life, and are you kind of helping and supporting them? So we're going to take a minute to just do the My Hope Network worksheet, if everyone can pull that up. And, and there are a couple other worksheets. You can download them and use them. These are just to kind of start getting you thinking about hope and what it takes to kind of create a framework for hope and support for hope in your life. So when we look at the network, we think about friends and family you can count on, people you turn to for stress skills. So are there people that can support you in this? Is there anyone you practice happiness habits with? Things that you can connect to. We talk about nature, spiritual advisor, peer support, pets, nature, business advisors, those kinds of things. The Nest is a great place for a network. And then medical experts you can turn to, support services, community resources. So I just wanted you to take a minute and think about and write down some of these, and then also where you can go in time of crisis, because even if you don't think you'll ever need it, it's good to have it identified and then also be able to share it with others for your community. So if you can just take a minute and kind of think through this, and you can talk amongst your group if you want as well. We'll take about, I'd say 3 minutes for this, and then why don't we just discuss all together for maybe 5 minutes after you take some time to think about it. So what'd you think? First of all, have you guys written this down before? Have you thought about your network and been really specific in identifying it? Is it something you've kind of intentionally worked on, or is it just something that happened? Amy says, first time. I love that. Anyone else? Same, first time. Many of you at Cruzio too. I love this. I know. I mean, here, teachers, friends, family. Awesome. From Alex. First time too for Laura. Yeah, it's amazing. Our networks, who we surround ourselves with, are so important, and there's so much research around this. And I mean, I went through most of my younger years just surrounding myself with whoever felt good at the time and was, convenient, and didn't really think about intentionally, like, what do I want in my life and who's going to be there to support family, reflection, and friends, says Todd. And so taking time to really think through it, think through the people that are in your life, who you spend the most time with, and are they really supporting you in what you hope for? I've been in recovery almost 18 years, and I had to create a new network and be very intentional about the people I spend time with, and as I work in business and in nonprofit projects, again, and our time is limited. So thinking through this is just such an important part of hope, and we know the research around hope is our network really helps us to achieve what we want. They say with goal setting, you're much more like up to 95% more likely to achieve a goal if you write a goal down, and then if you have an accountability partner, so someone you're checking in with regularly to make sure you're on track and to kind of compare notes and to kind of stay accountable to. So your network is really important and really in all that you hope for. Okay, we'll go on to any other thoughts on the network. Can we move on?
I just wanted to say that doing this exercise, it actually helped highlight for me roles that people have played that I actually didn't see them as playing, or it wasn't, like I said, as highlighted. It's maybe one of those things you take for granted too.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Was there another comment? Yeah, it's amazing to see kind of what kind of shows up on that worksheet when you start really identifying. But if you're working with students, you want to make sure that everyone has identified at least one person they can go to. The last thing we talk about is eliminating challenges, and this is so challenging. It's a bucket, but it's those things in our mind that our mind does to keep us out of the present moment. They say we're out of the present moment maybe almost 50% of the time. And even if we're thinking about something positive that happened in the past, we're still unhappier than we would be if we were just in the present moment. And so they did a really interesting study on it. But so learning how to do that is really important. And so we want to stop the rumination, so the going over and over and over things of the past. I mean, it's important to reflect and learn from what happened in the past, but when you get stuck on those cycles of, oh, I did such a bad thing, and you don't actually learn from it and move on, it can have a really negative impact on hope. When we worry about things in the future, so they say like 95% of what you worry about never happens. And so really getting back into the present moment. We know this is a big challenge globally with internalizing failure with students. They fail at a grade and they think, I am a failure, when actually the truth is whatever they did in the process to attain that grade failed. And so if we can de-identify with that failure and start thinking about, okay, where in the process did we fail to getting that? And how can we change that process in the future so that we don't have that same outcome? When we try to control things outside of our control, that leads to helplessness and despair. And then, of course, clinical depression or anxiety. But again, I think a lot of this, if you proactively manage your hopelessness and get to hope, you can really prevent depressive episodes and panic attacks and all of that. But we have to learn these new skills. And so I'm going to just touch briefly on what we're doing with Hopeful Cities and the programs that we have. That's kind of a framework for how we teach hope and how you can kind of activate hope in your own life and the lives of students and, family and friends. That's kind of how we've developed and what we've learned about how to hope. But Hopeful Cities, so we just had a day of hope yesterday and we're launching this. I'm grateful I just got this appointment at the United Nations to represent the World Federation for Mental Health, which is a global nonprofit that is affiliated with the World Health Organization. But to activate hope, so we aim to do a UN resolution to create an International Day of Hope. We kind of celebrated that here in yesterday's putting out some proclamations, but I'm really passionate about sustainable business models that don't cost a lot of money on implementation. So when we've created the framework, my aim was to create a program that kids could use around the world free. Because again, we know hopelessness is often a consequence of oppression and discrimination, and those groups generally don't have the funds or oftentimes, and those are the people that need these skills the most, and we want to have access to these skills. So I've committed to having this program for young kids free. It's called Hopeful Minds. You can see it at hopefulminds.org, but we have a 3-lesson overview that I'm excited to say we now have police going into schools and after school programs and teaching hope to young kids. How do you identify and manage that stress response? It's been really pretty amazing to see. We're creating a training program for that Anthem has sponsored, and it'll be free so that anyone can use it anywhere in the world. And then police have tools to go in and teach students. So that's kind of how we're activating it in the education system. We're working to get funding to develop a teen program because we know teens learn differently. So we're looking at a peer-to-peer kind of teaching model, and they would actually help us develop that. I created a program through my company, Hopeful Mindsets on the College Campus, that we're doing in colleges. We actually did a study, a research project on it with ASU, and they looked at pre and post. And I just got the data today that hope scores in our Hopeful Mindsets course, hope scores went up significantly. And in the classes that didn't take the course went down significantly, hope through the semester, and the reverse with anxiety. So we know that hopelessness is increasing on the college campuses, and as is anxiety and depression. And so it's really inspiring that this is actually having impact through course and through learning all of these skills that we talked about. We talk about, so we have in our Hopeful Cities website, there's tons of free resources. We just created a Hopeful City playbook. So we have the measures, we have all of the programming we did murals that kind of talk about SHINE. So we use the SHINE framework, and we have plaques that showcase what these things are and how to start activating them. We have a 5-day challenge that's free that anyone can take. We have billboards, yard signs, but really activating hope globally. So this is kind of a plan to do that. So I am really excited just about all the work we've been doing and the progress we've made, and again, the ability so that cities can activate it free in their own city and in their own school systems. And it's so important to really kind of everything we want in life, hope. And so and thank you for sharing those links. So I think that with that, I know we have time for some Q&A if you want to ask questions about this, any of the work, what we've been doing. The hope lessons, do these cost? Santa Cruz is not yet a hopeful city, so we need to work on getting that done. And we just literally yesterday finished the playbook. Let's see, the hope lessons. So Hopeful Minds is free. So if you go to hopefulminds.org, all of it is free. And we've done a great deal to make sure that we don't have to go and implement it in schools, that it's all scripted. So teachers have scripts, they have stories, they have lessons, they have activities to do with kids. They have posters they can put up. So it's, I believe anyone can teach hope. You just have to kind of learn. We have workbooks in Spanish, so we don't have the actual program in Spanish yet, the curriculum, but the workbooks are in Spanish. And we are working to get that translated at some point. So yes, great questions. I'm gonna stop my share. Let's see, I think that's it.
Kathryn, there's a question here about the hopeful score for adults. You said, is there one for adolescents or youth as well?
Yes. Yeah, there's a children's hope measure, and that's another reason we use the Snyder one. So they're both Snyder scales, and they're on our website, iFred.org, or you can find it on Hopeful Minds as well. Let's see. Yeah, it's on Hopeful Minds and it'll say hope measure. Yep, and so we've used that in our research with kids around the world, looking at kind of pre and post, what we call intervention, but it's really kind of just a whole school approach course on hope.
Great. Any other questions out there in either Zoom Land, Video, Digital Nest, or Cruz.io? Well, if I don't see any questions, it looks like we're moving on to the next portion of our program, which is to hear from young local entrepreneurs and innovators in Santa Cruz County. So we're going to switch screen shares here in a moment. And as we do that, thank you, Kathryn, for the wonderful, hopeful thoughts around hope. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I do want to just quickly give a shout out to all of our teachers again. For many of you who do not know, today is National Teacher Appreciation Day. So thank you for our teachers and hoping you make it one last month for the school year and are ready for some summer break, which we all can use a summer break during a crazy, and unprecedented year in our classrooms. So thank you all. If you are or ever been a teacher, our hearts go out to you. And with that, I want to pass it along to Doug to introduce our wonderful presenters and panelists today. So, Doug.
Great. I'll start by thanking my dad, who was started out as a math teacher, and here we go here, and eventually retired as a principal of a high school. Really hard to get away with anything if you're a student and your dad is the principal of a high school, but I did. Anyway, I'd like to welcome Alexandra. I've known her now for at least 5, 6, 7 years, when she was first at Digital Nest and then at Latinas in Tech, and then, which is a global program, and more recently she joined Paystan. So with that, can't really see, but I believe that's Alexandra up there. Are you there? Yes. Here we go.
I'm here. So thank you, Doc, for the introduction, and thank you, Kathryn, for such a great presentation. We have 1 minute.
Yeah, just
Okay. Very quickly, who I am a Colombian, I am an immigrant, which means that I can actually identify with the immigrants, and we have some immigrants here. So I'm looking at them. I'm so proud of you guys to be here. I am a mom, a wife. I have 3 gorgeous kids, and as Doc already talked about me, I came from Colombia 20 years ago, knowing only Spanish, and the process for being an immigrant was super hard. And here I am, thanks to Hope, and I am the chief of staff of a big organization, a startup that is called Paystan. And previous to that, I had the privilege to work at Latinas in Tech, also as a chief of staff. Previous to that, I was working here at Digital Nest, which I love with all my passion and my work. So this is my professional background, and I'm here to support for Hope any young and Latino that I know and I personally meet. And then I pass it to you back again, Doc.
Is it? And up next, we have celebrity guest, Will Wiseman. How shall I introduce Will? Well, first time I saw him, he was about 3 feet tall in school. He went to Gateway, and then he went away for a long time, and he came back and he created a company called Climatize, and he was recently awarded funding through Central Coast Angels, and it was mind-boggling because out of 8 to 10 years of funding various startups in Santa Cruz, Central Coast Angels 15 people would occasionally, you know, 1, 2, or 3 of them might fund a company. And with Will's company, unanimously, they all decided to fund him. So he's got something going on. Let's talk to Will.
Thank you very much, Doug. It's great to be here with you all. My name is Will Wiseman. I am a career professional in the climate tech industry. I grew up here in Santa Cruz, studied a mechanical engineering degree down in San Diego State, and then moved to Europe for 2 years to do a double master's degree in renewable energy engineering. While I was there, I met my co-founder, and she and I decided to start Climatize, which is a platform with which you can invest in clean energy projects with as little as 1 penny. We're crowdfunding clean energy projects, meaning we're bringing them to life here in the community and as well as abroad, and really helping create a channel through which everyday people can really kind of take the climate action that they see fit and earn the benefits for doing so. We want to accelerate the clean energy transition and make it so that everyone can share in those benefits. It's been really exciting to be back here in Santa Cruz, and as Doug mentioned, we've raised both venture capital money from the government as well as from local angel investors. So really excited to be here in Santa Cruz and continuing to grow our roots in the neighborhood here.
And I can't even tell if the camera's on me. And next up is Adrian. And God, what can I say about Adrian? We first met when you were I think a senior at UCSC, yeah, or junior? Freshman. Oh my God. That's right. But you went through school in 3 years, I think. Yeah? Yeah. And through the pandemic years, he joined us at Santa Cruz Works and was most valuable MVP day after day after day. And then he joined the amazing global company Gazelle, and he's going to tell you about that.
Oh, thank you, Doug. Yeah, Doug was actually my first boss right during university. I learned marketing, project management, and since then I've taken that into my current role at Gazelle, which is a big Dutch company in project management and digital marketing. So my story is split somewhere between the Bay Area in the US and Germany. Went to high school over in Europe and studied digital media at UCSC. And well, at this point, it's great to be at a company that has such global reach to help people find better commuting solutions, to get people on bikes, and just bringing hope and joy through that work. When somebody gets on a new e-bike and it changes how they commute, changes how they move, it's really a special thing to see. Another special thing to see on the slides is the image where there's a dog, now 100 pounds. Another reason for hope. Her name is Amber, and she was a rescue that we actually found on the street and have since raised to 100 pounds plus. So that's a little bit about myself. Panel questions are next.
Okay, Kathryn, did you want to take any further questions? And does the audience have questions for Kathryn or any of our celebrity guests?
Yeah, well, I would love to ask a few questions to kick it off, if I may. First, I want to say great group of panelists because you touched on 3 subjects that can be high in hopelessness. So I think we have a lot to learn from you. We know that immigrants, those that English is a second language, super, you think about oppression and discrimination and all that you kind of manage. So we'll learn a great deal from you. Also, Will, with the environment, we know that this is a single great cause of hopelessness for young kids. They're what we call kind of dread or global, environmental dread, climate dread. And then Adrian, we know that entrepreneurs, and those in business can be high in hopelessness because of all the challenges you face and all of the failure that you deal with in business. So I'm grateful to have you all sharing. And I'll ask a couple questions, and the audience can feel free to jump in. But the first one is really around stress skills. So what you had for stress skills for your specific situation and how you're kind of proactively managing your stress. So does anyone want to start with that?
I'll start. So what do I do for stress? Nature is my best friend. My family and my dog is my second and third best friends. But I will say that something very important was to learn about myself. So now I know when I feel stressed, when my body feels heavy, I know that it's time to disconnect, to unplug, to plug. And I know that I love to go into walks to the beach, to enjoy my kids and my husband, to drink a lot of water. I actually drink a lot of water, and I love the contact with the sun, even though I know that it's not very healthy for my skin, but those vitamin D is great. And I also try to see myself into the mirror and smile to myself too. This is something that I always bring, like a smile. When you were talking about smiling, that really make me feel less stressed and more into a happiness mode.
I love that. It's wonderful.
You have a really great point here in that, the jobs that we're doing are particularly stressful. And for me, I find that I very acutely feel that eco-anxiety that you had mentioned. And it's deep in why I created the company. And for me, actually, I tend to turn that anxiety actually into work. I'm not one for really sitting around and talking about things per se. I tend to like to actually do something about it. And so, for me, working on Climatize and actually helping build clean energy projects is kind of how I release my stress in a way. And it adds to a bit of a workaholic, but I guess that's how I'm also a CEO. So
awesome. Thanks, Will.
Yeah, you both had really insightful points on those stress skills. First, like learning about yourself. It's your starting point. An analogy that I've used for stress skills is seeing it as a bathtub filling with water, just as global temperature is also one of those bathtub situations. You need to know what's coming in and what's going out, how much stress is being added on top, and how do you manage what's already there. And adjusting the inflow, that's a lot about deciding what to say yes to and what to say no to. Oftentimes saying no, which can be difficult, is exactly how you say, no, it's a boundary. That's not stress I want to take on. And adjusting the outflow, for me, that's a lot about balance. It's like when I go surfing, when I go biking, when I do the different things that give me happiness and hope. It's a constellation.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I just want one follow-up question with Alexandra. What would you say to younger students that do have English as a second language and are dealing with stress? Do you have any advice for them on how they might kind of manage that?
Yeah, actually, Kathryn, this is a great question. And I was talking here with two of them in Spanish, lo cual me encanta hacer. And the first thing is to be patient with ourselves, right? Like we need to learn who we are and admire who we are and love who we are in the way we are. So for example, for me, when I came to the States, my English, as many people used to tell me, your English sucks, your accent sucks. And I was like feeling really bad, right? Like kind of in the way of depression. And nowadays, I really don't care about my accent. I really don't care. I love the way that I am. So I will say, like, be patient with yourselves and love yourself as if it was your own child, right? No, don't be so judgmental with yourself. Don't be so judgmental. Just accept who you are, work in your values, have hope. And to me, hope is all related with trust that I would be able to do it. Hope, of course, is extremely important. And there is always a way, and there is always a way to get what you want to go, but be a little bit patient with yourself. That would be something that I would say to them.
I love that. That's great advice. I know we so often talk about compassion for other people, and yet we forget the self-compassion and the self-love and the self-nourishing and kind of all of those things. And they're so important because we can be our harshest critic. So yeah, it's amazing. Okay, let's go back to Will. What are you, or Adrian, what are you most hopeful about?
Well, I'm really hopeful about this recognition that stress actually is an issue that affects like environment and us, like both of those. I think the more we learn about ourselves, the more we can also approach big challenges like the environment. So this growing recognition and this drive from so many different sectors to improve how we manage stress on ourselves, manage stress on our environment, and the relation of those two, that's something that really gives me hope. So an event like this is a great example.
Well, that's awesome. Does anyone else want to take that?
Sure. Yeah. I'm personally hopeful about the up and coming generations. I have a lot of hope that the next generations have kind of a better sense of how we as a society balance our inputs and outputs in terms of consumption and resource use. I believe that the younger generations have a better sense of kind of information as a whole, especially younger adults have just been given so much information from a very, very young age. And so they're acutely aware of many of the kind of injustices, whether they're social, environmental, financial. And so I have this sense that this up and coming generation is going to be somewhat more informed and aware and look to solve many of the problems that we find in our current society. And so I'm hopeful that many of the people hopefully hearing this presentation will search inside themselves and kind of choose a topic or an area in which they want to actively and passionately solve problems within.
I love that, Will. And you're a great example of turning what you're super passionate about and what you care a lot about into action. So if we get really upset or like if we're really passionate about the environment, we can go into despair and helplessness very easy, but it's learning to kind of transmute that energy and know that, no, this is actually something I care about. I need to use that energy not for self-harm or harming other people, but for driving change. This is like a great indicator of my passion and what I want to do. So that's really great. And what about you, Alexandra? What are you hopeful about?
I will say that my hope is in the workplace and also for future generations. I would love to see the new workplaces full of multicultural people, taking out our, how do we call like the slogans that we have, because, you know, and making sure that everybody, this is my hope, that everybody is working on unleashing their power and working on their dreams, on their mission, and in collaboration between everybody for a better future, wherever we are. That's my hope.
I love that. I love that. And we're gonna go to the networks. So creating strong networks for hope. And I'm sure networks have been important for all you all have achieved, which is so much. So it's quite impressive. So I'm wondering if you have suggestions or ideas for how you created those networks and for people looking to create networks.
Sure, yeah. So just this last Friday, we gathered the first of its kind Santa Cruz Climate Consortium, thanks to Doug Erickson here, and Adrian was here as well with us. And we got together 50 local CEOs, government representatives, investors, academics, activists, all with a range of different kind of perspectives and areas of study, everything from Joby and the electric flying vehicles. We had, local project developers as well as scientists working on salmon conservation and collaboration projects. And Molly Wood, yes, the NPR host and climate investor. And so really what the idea there was to to catalyze local collaboration, kind of bring minds together to help solve these big problems. Because, I think a big part is that when you feel like an isolated island trying to tackle a problem, you can feel very overwhelmed. Whereas when you realize that there are many other passionate people helping work on these projects as well, helping bring them together not only accelerates action on these problems, but as well as creates a community which we are stronger together, and helps us actually, create more as a whole.
Love that.
Yeah,
Who would like to tackle that next?
go for it.
Okay, I'll go. I will try to look where I am.
I know, it's fair.
Well, I love that, that's true, but I will say that if we don't have too many resources or network, which is what happened to us as an immigrant, get what you get, but take advantage of what you have. In other words, take yourself as your first network, right? Like make sure that you're nourishing yourself. Number two, take your family as your second network. Make sure that your family is giving you that support. Number three, your school, your university, the place where you are working, your boss, your teachers, your supervisors, the mayor where you are, social media in a positive way. For example, LinkedIn is something that is huge, right? And then I will say that everybody should have a coach, spiritual advisor, at least this is important for me, a mentor, an advisor, and an advocate. That is like the complete ecosystem for your dream, for your vision to be successful.
That's awesome. I love that. And I'm actually going to add now, this is how Hope Science works. We're going to add to our worksheet to how do you nourish yourself in that network. We're going to add that. So that's such an important point. And it's good to have people reflect on that as well, that relationship with self. So excellent. Adrian, did you want to?
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. I think it's really good points about looking at yourself in a network and also finding strength in community, in collaboration. I think a network is really about connection. And I think that starts with determining what's valuable for you, like who you are. Your personality is who you bring to society, community, to other people, and knowing what that is all about. Then being curious that, say, in which way do you approach others? Are you trying to learn? Are you trying to foster connection? And finally, just nurturing this investment over time of sticking with people, working together, back to your point of choosing projects, choosing causes, and being there for each other to bring about a result, which turns into a sort of positive self-reinforcing loop. If you have a project that's successful, you'll be more willing to do more together, and so continue to grow that network and the success that you're finding.
Yeah, I think one important thing to note in networks also is, it's a very give and take relationship in which you're trading social capital, which is intangible. You can't simply give and you can't simply take, there has to be that kind of back and forth. And so it's one of the kind of most intangible but important skills to learn is kind of the empathy, and how do you help contribute to other people's lives in order for them to want to support you, and vice versa. And I think a really healthy way of thinking of it is not in a transactional way, but rather just this is kind of how we build this relationship over time, and then fostering that relationship so that when those times come to call upon a favor, that it's something you willingly and happily do, versus feeling like, hey, this is what I'm trading you in this moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, such an important point. It is a relationship developed over time, and some people can think of it as transactional, and that can be very harmful for creating a strong, solid network, supportive network. Okay, I have one final question for you, and anyone else can, of course, ask stuff, but what do you recommend to the next generation of these leaders in the room? Anything they can put into place to help them become more successful in Santa Cruz and achieve what they hope for?
Who wants to start? You guys can start.
Start. think balance is incredibly important, and not to want too much too soon, especially professionally. Like holding back and just recognizing that you're right where you need to be is best starting point. It's really the only point you have at each given moment. And then, yeah, being curious, exploring, especially early on in a career, you have time. This is something I sometimes struggle with. I want results soon and want to push toward them, but sometimes it's more beneficial to really take a step back to recognize where you are, to reflect, and to see that there's an amazing community around you. There's, well, being in Santa Cruz, there's so much in the outdoors to enjoy. There's so many opportunities for balance. So that recognition is the starting point.
Well, I would say, first of all, come work in climate. You know, we need to have some hope that the planet's going to be here, and it's something that needs all hands on deck, whatever your interest is. I think that we oftentimes think of this industry as purely scientists or engineers, and there's roles for marketing professionals and communicators and, you know, really any color that you can imagine within that space. It's a very passionate and diverse industry, and we're looking for more people. Additionally, you know, I think looking at really where the trends of technology are headed, setting yourself up with a technical degree, something like engineering or computer science, you know, those are really strong foundational building blocks with which you can kind of diversify into the future. I mean, I studied mechanical engineering and renewable energy engineering, but I'm working in finance now. I think it's kind of a one-way street. If you teach yourself engineering, you can go back and do any of the other stuff, but you can't really study business and then go be an engineer. So I think setting yourselves up with that technical foundation allows you to see the world very differently, and kind of with that foundation and how you understand and view the world, you approach problems very differently. So I would highly recommend that anyone kind of pursue a technical career, and ultimately that can help build upon passions. Even if you go and study engineering, you can still be an artist and apply that, you know, understanding to building really large scale buildings or, you know, incredible bioengineered art. There's all of the pathways are opening, but if you look at the trajectories of tech, setting yourselves up with one of those foundational careers is a really great way to put yourself on an interesting path.
Amazing.
I just want to say that I support everything that they said. I am an engineer too, and I totally get that I was the only woman engineer in my time, and it was a very complicated engineering career. But nowadays, when I see my career, I can see how my problem solving skills, my creativity, the framework, my logic, it helped me to be where I am right now. So you are right in what you were saying. It's easier to be an engineer or to be in computer science and then go to whatever you want to do in life. And I also will say that something very practical, especially for you, the youth, is look for what you like to do and do it. If you are good in soccer, go and play soccer. If you're good in dancing, go and do whatever you want to do, because Santa Cruz is such a powerful community full of opportunities for sports, for volunteers, for support, that I also just go out and look for that opportunity that makes sense to you. Going in person, talk to people, don't be afraid. Sign up to community, it's a really nice community, it's very open-minded. And if I succeed here, coming from Colombia, you know, like 20 years ago, you can do it too.
Amazing. You all are fantastic. And hopefully I'll learn. So anyone have questions? Open it up.
This is your chance to ask any of our celebrity guests questions, as well as Kathryn, the hostess.
We have a question here at Digital Nest.
¿Qué les diría a esas personas que todavía no encuentran la esperanza en su vida?
What do I say to people who doesn't have any hope? Can I say this in Spanish? Can I be inspired in Spanish? Okay. Que todos hemos pasado por ese camino y que soñar es lo único que a uno nadie le puede quitar. escribir ese sueño, escribirlo, entender cuál es esa misión que uno tiene de vida y escribir cuáles son los siguientes pasos, esas victorias cortas que yo puedo hacer hoy para seguir avanzando. And I'm going to say that now in English. No one can take out your dreams. No one. No your husband, no your friends, no one except for you. So dream about what you want, because this is your mission in life. Then write down, what do you want to do to make that possible? But to me, what it works is to write down short victories, not thinking in the future. I want to know, what can I do today to be better tomorrow? And something that I can do today is, for example, being compassionate to myself. Something that I can do today is getting one of my skills out there. If I like to dance, dance and say to people, I'm dancing. And be proud of yourself too. Work on that. Gracias por tu pregunta.
And I'll add to that too, that you got to practice skills to get to hope, because we're taught how to be hopeless. So it's easy to be in that despair and helplessness. And it's learning really how to activate hope for ourselves with some of the things you said, and starting to put these practices into play. But it's always possible. Hope is possible for anyone.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, in learning, in reading, you realize that people have gone through all sorts of different situations throughout history, really challenging situations. And the more you read about the challenges that they've overcome, the more you can take some of those lessons and apply them to your current situation. And that has provided a lot of hope for me.
Okay, any other questions here? We're open to questions. Okay. I think we've just about got it, wrapped it up. Any from the Cruz.io audience? Any questions that you might have? All right. Well, that's a wrap. I want to thank everybody for participating, and we've learned a lot here about the tools that one needs to be hopeful, and everything from your network, which I think is very important, obviously. I like creating networks. That network also, I want to say, you know, if they're not supportive, you wouldn't want to be around a bunch of negative people if you yourself are not feeling positive. I've had this problem with my kids, so I know. And so seek people that are really going to inspire you. I know that that if my literature teachers used to say, "Oh, just go read a classic. That'll fix everything." Well, I think more importantly, go find somebody that you really admire and try to do things with that person. Try to emulate what they're doing, because sometimes that can lead to advancement in careers and relationships, and ultimately give you purpose and hope. So with that, I don't know, Kathryn, do you have any final remarks?
No, I love that, but I would love to have you do a workshop on creating networks, because I think you are the best networker I've ever met. And you just, yeah, you have such strong connections, and you have such an incredible way of bringing community together and different people together. And so I think you're a great mentor and role model for Santa Cruz, and you've definitely been super supportive in the time that we've had to spend together. So I'm really grateful for you.
It takes a tribe and a community, and we're just so lucky to be in Santa Cruz. I count my blessings every single day. So with that, I want to thank Santa Cruz Office of Education and Cruz.io, and of course Santa Cruz Works, and Kathryn, and our celebrity guests. And we wish you a wonderful summer. We'll be back again towards the end of the summer with the next Think Big series.